Hi everyone, this is Jason, and welcome back to the channel. Today my guest is Kim Crawley. Kim is a cybersecurity expert and writer whose content has been featured on ThreatVector, Tripwire, AT&T Cybersecurity, Silence, and Peerless. In this video, we discuss cybersecurity, malware, antivirus, and actions individuals can take to protect themselves online. I want to thank Kim in advance for joining me today. Please take a moment and subscribe to the channel. And also like and share the episode as it helps us grow. Thank you. So, hi Kim, how are you doing?
Hi, Jason. I'm doing great, thanks.
So, your background is in cybersecurity, right?
Yep.
What were you always a writer in it, or did you kind of find your way into that?
That's an excellent question. I think my IT career kind of informally started when I was about 9 years old. It was the early 90s, and my dad was a novelist who worked from home.
Okay.
And whenever he had any sort of issues with his Windows 3.1 PC, I figured out how to fix them for him. I remember editing auto exec bat so that Windows would load faster. I remember fixing his LPT1, LPT2 kind of issues with his printer interface.
Right. Right.
And I was like just a little kid figuring this stuff out.
Oh yeah.
My dad was a novelist, so I was born and raised with the idea that someone could be a writer for a living.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
I didn't really consider a career in computer technology at all until I was in my mid-20s.
Okay.
And nothing else working out. I did like a lot of customer service, call center stuff, like pizza delivery, retail, stuff like that.
Right.
I started to study for some CompTIA certifications, like A+, Network Plus.
Yeah.
And then eventually, by about age 25 or so, I landed a job as consumer Windows remote tech support,
All right.
which I did for like a good number of years. And a typical day, like a typical 8-hour shift at work, I would close about 30 tickets or so.
Right.
And a lot of them were malware. I started to see like the early knots Windows malware.
Right. Right. Right.
At the time, we were supporting Windows XP, Windows Vista, and malware fascinated me.
Yeah.
Sometimes I had to come up with my own solutions for fixing the damage that it would do, like to LNK files and stuff like that on the desktop.
Right.
So that's when the cybersecurity bug hit me.
Yeah.
And I started to, at the same time, become a political journalist, just doing really low-level stuff for very small publications. And then eventually, someone I met in the journalism sphere picked up on the fact that I enjoy writing. Mm-hmm. And that I understand computer technology and I'm interested in cybersecurity.
Right.
And that's how my career started in cybersecurity blogging, like about 2009, 2010.
Right. Yeah.
And for the first 5 years or so of my career, I did not make enough money from my job that it could be my day job.
Right.
But once I started working for companies like BlackBerry Silence and Tripwire and Alien Vault, which is now AT&T Cybersecurity, and Vanafi, when I started working for companies like that, that's when it became a good day job for me.
Right. Yeah.
And now it is my day job. This is my job. I'm not a security practitioner. I just write about this stuff.
Well,
so
I think
my learning is constantly every day and on the job.
Nice. Well, I think that's one reason why we connected so well on Twitter is because that's kind of where I am too. You know, of course, my primary content is typically cryptocurrency, but I don't think you can talk about crypto without talking about cybersecurity too. And so when I started writing, freelance writing, it was cryptocurrency, but it was also cybersecurity related as well, because you think that, yeah, sure, you're in crypto, but your crypto is on an Android phone. We need to talk about cybersecurity, right?
Yeah.
So let me ask you a couple of questions about that. Do you think the average person is aware just how much of a threat is out there?
That is an excellent question. Uh, my perspective might be a bit skewered and biased because half of the time I'm talking to people in my own industry, and of course they don't have a lay person's perspective on it. The other half of the time I am talking to my own friends and people in my personal life. And my boyfriend was a computer programmer. But aside from that, no one in my personal life outside of the industry is really that computer literate. So do they understand that cyber attacks and various different types of cyber threats are a growing problem? I think so. I think because they read the work that I do and they read what's in the mainstream media. Like, I think cyber attacks are being reported more often in the major newspapers and on CNN and major network television and stuff like that. And I don't think, I mean, obviously they don't have the professional context to put that in. Like, for instance, if Facebook is hit by a major data breach. But I think they are starting to become aware of at least, complex passwords on their user accounts and not giving away too much information on the internet that could be used by a cyber attacker. But yeah, I think awareness is very gradually growing, but I need to talk to lay people more to have a more general impression of that. I think when you see these stories in the mainstream news more often, there is a growing public awareness.
Right, true. Well, and that goes back to, it goes into the need for password managers, I think, because people being people tend to take convenience over security.
Oh, yeah.
And that's why you have people using God, sex, and their dog's first name as their passwords, because that's something we all remember, right? But we're talking security, so you got to be a little bit more complicated than that, right?
I think you know as well as I do that people in our industry say that passwords are a really shitty form of authentication.
Yes.
Like, the better a password is, the less human friendly it is.
Correct.
Generally speaking.
Yeah. Well, like, you get the password managers that say, do you want it to be pronounceable? Right? Well, no, you don't. Right? Take that off. You want it to be as obscured as possible so that it's harder to guess. How do you feel about that? Like, do you think people need to just suck it up and just get stronger passwords?
I mean, obviously, we need users to use passwords that are as many characters as the program will possibly support. It's not realistic to expect human beings to remember passwords like that, passwords that are like 20 plus characters and a complete random jumble of characters. It's not reasonable to expect any human being to remember stuff like that. So, like you, I agree that it's a good idea to use password managers, because not only do they store a unique password for each authentication vector you use, but also it'll help you generate a more secure password.
Right, which is why I like them primarily.
Yeah. I mean, obviously, there have been some password managers in the past that have had fatal cybersecurity flaws. In my experience and based on the research I've seen so far, I trust the password managers that are built into Google Chrome and into Mozilla Firefox.
Right,
so
like the Google Authenticator?
Yeah, and the Google Authenticator. I just used Google Authenticator today.
Right.
So yeah. I think those are good applications. I think 1Password has been pretty good for people. When there are cybersecurity problems with password managers, that's an absolute bloody nightmare, because obviously that will leak all of your passwords.
Well, and that actually, and I'm so glad you brought that up, because that is a beautiful point. Because in cryptocurrency, for example, we're always talking about protecting our keys, protecting our information, protecting our data. But we hear about these exchanges getting hacked all the time. So it's basically, if I'm a hacker, I don't need to hack you. I can hack them and get your information, right? So, and it's the same thing with the password managers. I don't need to know your password. I need to know how to get into, well, I'm not going to name any ones because I know the one you're talking about. But, a hacker just needs to go after them, and then he or she gets all of their information of all their users that they have stored on their poorly protected server.
If you were to break into my home and my home office, and my computer was turned on and I was logged into my account, you would have access to my entire digital world. Because I store passwords in my web browsers, and I store like my other sorts of authentication stuff there, like to the encryption that's on my external hard drives and stuff like that.
Right.
Because that's set up for my convenience, with the assumption that if I'm in my home office, it's me and I have a right to access.
Right.
Right now, if someone were to break into my home office, they would have a problem. Well, my master boot hard drive is encrypted.
Mm-hmm. As it should be.
And each of my external hard drives have their own encryption.
Right, as they should.
But once you enter in like the password for my admin account or one of my user accounts, you're it.
Right.
And you have access to all of that.
But in fairness, you did the due diligence to put a layer of protection there. I mean, most people, their computers are no harder to get into than what their middle name is. I mean, right? At least
I have a very complex password that I use for my
right.
operating system.
And I'm of the mind where you did what's necessary. Nobody's 100% safe, but at least you made the effort. So I have to give you kudos for that.
Yeah, I mean, we are never completely immune from cyber attack. We are all at risk. It's only a matter of mitigating the risk.
Right, exactly. And that, I think that is where my next question rolls around is, you did the due diligence to set up your encryption. I do encryption on all of my hard drives. But I wonder how many of these companies that sell this equipment have that kind of have that in mind for their consumers. Like when you go to Best Buy and you buy a computer, it's already chock full of bloatware and God knows what else, right? Do they take into account that this stuff can be hacked, this stuff can be infiltrated, and then the person using this computer is then therefore hacked and infiltrated because of what they did?
It makes a big difference about the sector and the vendors themselves, right? Like, for instance, out of the major tech companies, like the ones based in Silicon Valley, I think few have improved their security better than Microsoft has over the years. I mean, server versions of Windows, like Windows Server or like Windows NT before that, have generally had pretty good security, but the client versions of Windows had pretty bad security up until Windows XP, when they finally used like the NT file system, right?
Right.
So I think that was because Windows products are on so many computers worldwide that any really shoddy security implementation is going to have a major effect, and it's going to hurt their bottom line. So eventually Microsoft learned to make their client operating systems as possible to security harden as their server operating systems.
Right.
And the security features in Windows 10 compared to, you know, previous client Windows really impresses me, quite frankly. Like the
Yeah.
biggest thing for me is like Windows Defender, right? Like that is now good AV.
Oh yeah, yeah. Yeah. Windows Defender is good. That, what was it? Windows Essentials. That
Yeah.
nonsense.
Back in the 90s, like Windows NT wasn't bad, but Windows 95 and Windows 3.1,
Yeah.
based on FAT, you know, no file level permissions, single user environments.
Right.
And then those were a lot of the first computers that consumers were using to access the internet.
Right.
So
And
it's just terrifying, right?
right. Right. Well, I mean, they're
But
which
Microsoft greatly improved because of how massive they are and what a massive effect a feature of one of their products would have on the world. It
right.
would come back to bite their bottom line.
Right.
Now, I speak to IoT researchers every so often, and they find that IoT toys, like for children or like little household gadgets, have some of the crappiest security possible. A lot of these are from like really small companies. They might figure that the cost of litigation, if someone sues them for being cyber attacked, is worth spending money on for the possible profit of not having to work so hard on developing a product.
Right. Right. Yeah. It is it cheaper to fight the lawsuit than it is to actually do this
Exactly.
here?
So, yeah, I mean, how much do vendors care about cybersecurity radically changes according to which vendor, which market sector,
Right.
basically.
That's true. Well, I mean, and once again, nobody is 100% safe, but I think that's one reason why people go ahead and fork over the money for Apple products as opposed to Windows products,
Yeah.
because even though a Mac can be hacked too if the person just really wanted to, you know, but it's far more complicated to do that than it is to do a Windows computer.
Maybe mainly because of like the Unix
Yeah,
base of like OS X now.
right. And also, well, it's also the fact that unlike um, Android apps, for example, iTunes is and their app store scrutinizes apps a lot more than Android and Google Play, apparently.
Yeah, it's a whitelisting app approval process.
Right. So you're less likely to have a malicious software on there because of the time it took for them to approve it to get on the store in the first place. Whereas, you know, you and I can kick up an app right now and it will be available to download by this afternoon.
Yeah.
You know? But I think that rolls into my next question of, are we being given a false sense of security by these antivirus and security companies? The average person doesn't know. I mean, all they know is it says antivirus. Right? But my question being the false sense of security, are are consumers being too complacent with thinking that these people know what they're talking about?
Yeah, yeah. Before I entered cybersecurity fully, when I was just resolving malware tickets and tech support, it was a very common assumption amongst lay people that you have antivirus software, you can't get a virus now.
Right.
They don't
Exactly.
understand how signatures work or malware detection heuristics.
Mm.
A lot of the problems also that market segment would have is a lot of Windows OEMs would have, you know, bloatware pre-installed trials of antivirus clients.
Right.
And they don't understand that if they don't give them their credit card number, that application is going to stop working as an antivirus shield.
Right.
But they would see, like, for instance, the McAfee logo on their desktop.
Right.
And so they would just assume, oh, I'm protected, I have McAfee.
Right.
Right?
Can I okay, remember I said we're going to talk about horror stories, right?
Okay.
All right. So the greatest horror story I've ever personally experienced. So I I get a call from a client, and one of their computers has ransomware on it, right? The screen's been blacked out, send us Bitcoin or whatever. So I asked them what kind of antivirus do they have, and
Mm-hmm.
they said McAfee.
Mm-hmm.
Okay? And I know McAfee. That's pretty good antivirus, right?
Mm-hmm.
So I asked them if they can show me one of the other computers because we need to make sure that this isn't going to happen on that computer too. So they showed me the computer. I see the McAfee icon, and I click on it, and it pops up as an ad to get McAfee. And I'm like, okay, you don't have McAfee on this computer. And they had like 30 computers.
You have it the moment you give McAfee money.
Right. But all they saw was the icon, and they thought that they had the antivirus. And I'm thinking to myself, oh no. Like, have you ever had that?
I think that has been like a huge problem from like the mid 2000s to now. I mean, I think companies like McAfee or Symantec would say, at least on a PR level, well, yeah, obviously the customer can see in the user interface that this is a limited offer trial, and if they would like to extend it, they buy our yearly package or whatever.
Right.
Customers don't realize that the way antivirus software works. They don't realize that your typical Windows antivirus client needs to get constant signatures.
Right.
And then I found in the past 10 years, even on a consumer level, that you can't just stick to signatures anymore either, because you can't detect all malware just by looking at a certain pattern of code.
Right. Right.
So I think most consumer client AV applications have had some sort of heuristics or another for the past 10 years.
Right. And then also we have to, people need to be aware that it's not just about viruses. There's keyloggers. There's, things that can activate your web camera. There's things that can activate mics. It's not just your computer doesn't work, right?
Well, there's like, malware is all software that does things that harm you or that you don't want.
Right, right. Well, I mean, my favorite TV show is Mr. Robot, and I've learned some terrifying things from that show that people can do with computers. That, you know what? And I make fun of Zuckerberg for a lot of things, but he puts tape over his camera, and I do the same thing.
Oh yeah, I did some sponsored content for HP last year, and one of the things that I promoted was a line of business laptops that actually have a cover that you can slide over the webcam.
Oh, nice.
So you don't even need the gross duct tape. You can just
Right.
snap the cover down.
That's cool. That's cool.
Yeah.
We need more of that, definitely.
Because people don't, the way you or I think about our computing interfaces is that if something can record video or audio, even if we're not knowingly running software that are using those peripherals the way we want them to,
right,
they can be accessed by cyber attackers, and people don't understand that. People don't understand that with certain kinds of malware, their computers could be taking video footage of them and they don't realize it, or on their phones. Right. All phones these days have cameras.
Exactly. And their microphones are listening whether we're talking on them or not.
Yeah.
I mean, that it actually blew my mind, that episode of Vice where Snowden took one apart and showed them the internal microphone. I was like, oh no. Like, oh no. Well, the other thing is, we have all of these phones out there. There's enough cell phones to pretty much give just about everyone on the planet a cell phone nowadays.
Mm-hmm.
What do you think is one of the things that people can do to protect themselves on their cell phones, because we live on our cell phones now, right? I mean, if something ever happened to this thing, I'd be in trouble.
I would say whether you have an Android phone or an iPhone, install antivirus software. Like the moment you get it. Malware is, as we know, a lot less common for iOS than it is for Android. Android is the #1 malware platform now.
Right. Right.
I mean, Android malware is now a bigger problem than Windows malware. It's been that way for the past several years now.
Right.
I mean, obviously, iOS gets a lot less malware than Android because, as we discussed, like the whitelisting system of app approval in the App Store, and also the fact that unless you jailbreak an iPhone, you
Right.
can't install outside .app files.
Right. You can't do third-party apps on unless it's a jailbroke phone.
I can install third-party apps on my Android phone just by changing the setting.
Exactly. Developer options, right?
Exactly.
You have to do, and not that I have done that.
I do that. Like I've developed some very simple Android apps, and I had to test them on my own phone.
Well, I think the closest thing you can do on an iOS is with their Xcode platform is how you design apps. But if they see it, they'll knock it off of your device. It's the one downside to Apple products is the amount of control they have of the.
Yeah.
And I guess for security reasons, that's good. For privacy reasons, it's not. Right?
Well, I respect Apple in a number of different ways, including their resistance to give up cryptographic keys to law enforcement.
Yeah, definitely.
I respect that a great deal. But there's a reason why I have an Android phone and my work desktop runs Ubuntu Linux.
Right, exactly.
And that's like, yeah, I want things to be easy to customize and modify. And I know that by having an Android phone, I'm putting myself at a little bit more risk than if I had an iPhone.
Right, exactly. And I think that's the trade-off, right? I mean, like, I like Apple products because they all talk to each other, right? So,
and I can understand that. I mean, having that kind of convenience is great.
right.
Apple software has always run pretty well, at least since the Apple II.
Yes.
No, it was the Apple Lisa that required to be dropped from a distance. But after that, after the Apple Lisa, by the Macintosh era.
Right. Yeah, the Macintosh era is when we started to see
that Apple software would run like a dream.
Right.
Because it was developed and tested on their specific hardware.
Right. And because before then, well, I mean, like you can make a Hackintosh, right, where you put that iOS on a Windows computer, but it's meant to be run on Apple products. It's not meant to be run on something else. And they did that intentionally,
I wonder if there were any Hackintoshes before there were x86 Macs, like back when Macs were only using Power PCs.
Right. Well, I mean, the first Macintosh came out, in 82, something like that?
84.
84. So, wow, I can't believe I got
The
that.
famous Apple Macintosh commercial that was
with the
aired
lady?
just once during the Super Bowl.
Yeah.
Aired about 2 weeks after I was born.
Oh, wow. Wow. Okay, so
I always thought that was kind of cool.
Remember,
I could have been a newborn baby, laying in the stroller.
That's right.
While that commercial showed on TV once.
Oh, wow. Yeah, you took me back right there. Okay. So, have you ever experienced anything like just like a travesty of cybersecurity in the in this industry that you've seen? Like,
how I was describing the person who thought they had antivirus and they really just had an advertisement.
Oh, but that's the kind of shit that I saw every day when I was doing Windows support. We're talking about ransomware. When people think about ransomware, they think of it always pertaining to cryptocurrency, right? And cryptocurrency is your area of specialization. A lot of people don't realize, even people in our industry, that ransomware predates Bitcoin.
Yes, it does. Yes.
So I was doing Windows tech support before Bitcoin, and there were credit card numbers. So I remember being in my tech support call center, and at any given time that I'd walk into the office, there'd be one of my coworkers in one of the cubicles, and this was around 2008 or so, begging and pleading the customer to not input their credit card number into the
right. Exactly.
But I just wanted to go away.
So, you know, and a lot of times what I found is that most cybersecurity issues start because people click on something they weren't supposed to. You know, like, you know, you're supposed to have like a, you know, in tech support, you're supposed to have like a bedside manner, I guess the way you could put it. Like, you're not supposed to just say, hey, what were you doing? Right. But you have to ask, hey, what were you doing? Right. Because I have to make sure you don't do it again. Right. So unfortunately, this person was looking at pictures they weren't supposed to.
Oh, okay.
And something got on their computer, caused the ransomware to pop up, and I told their manager. I didn't tell the manager what they did, because I mean, I don't want to risk somebody's job just for that. But basically, I told them that they need to invest in a course of cyber awareness. You know, because I think cyber awareness is just as powerful as antivirus. When you realize a lot of this stuff happens because of stuff that happened inside the system and not outside the system.
I've had a lot of success explaining to lay people to think of their antivirus like the seatbelts in a car.
Exactly.
This will not guarantee that you don't die in a car accident.
Correct.
And driving safely is as much as a factor.
Yes, exactly.
Use car analogies with lay people, and it works great.
I mean, that's. I think at the end of the day, the personal responsibility part is the most important part. You know, you shouldn't be going to, not safe for word, sites at work.
About 10 years ago, I was the IT department for an accountant. And he had really terrible malware that came from some of the porn that he BitTorrented.
Right.
And he was not particularly computer savvy, more than an accountant would have to be. And it was really embarrassing for him because he was like a middle-aged man. And at the time I was like a 20-something girl.
Oh.
But I said to him, I'm not going to reveal his identity, but I said to him, accountant guy, don't be embarrassed. Everyone likes porn. I will remove the malware, and then I'm going to make some bookmarks in Firefox for you. One of them is going to be for RedTube. And he was so appreciative.
Well, that was nice of
like
you.
Mainstream porn, right? So
right. Well, I mean, torrenting has always been a questionable activity anyway. You know, even back in the Napster days, you didn't know what you were downloading. You know, you assumed that it was, and like we all know, assuming makes asses of us all. So, you know, but no, that was actually really nice of you that you did that for him. All right, so let's wrap up with okay, so we have denial of service attacks and brute force attacks. What do you think is the worst kind of attack that's out there right now? Like, what do you think is the one that's going to get you that you can't do anything about? What do you think?
That is an excellent question, because I love researching malware, and I do work for an AV developer, BlackBerry Silence.
Mhm.
So malware absolutely fascinates me. But I think the worst cyber attacks are in the realm of cyber warfare.
Oh yeah.
There are massive nation state cyber warfare units in every large country on this planet.
Yeah.
China and Russia would probably be the prime instigators for Americans. If you look at stuff like Stuxnet, which it turned out was developed by the United States and Israel to attack nuclear facilities in Iran,
Correct.
those to me are the absolute worst malware, because the code was all obfuscated. It took researchers years to figure out what the hell it was.
Right.
There weren't any identifiable programming languages in most of the code.
Right.
That's the scary stuff. It's the malware that can be sent to a nuclear facility or other types of SCADA or industrial control system malware.
Right.
The
Well,
stuff that shut down power plants, hospitals, scientific research facilities. That's the scariest shit, in my opinion.
There's actually a book series by Mark. What's his name? I'll link it in the description for everybody. But there's one called it's called Trojan Horse and Zero Day. Right. These books freaked me out, because what happened was a hacker was able to take over the controls of a 747 and make it nosedive, right? Because we rely heavily on autopilot, more so than we used to, but I think it's the notion that these programs are out there and they're in the wild. This isn't like, you can't just say, okay, it's in that building right there. If we take out that building right there, that goes away. No, it's on the internet. And a lot of it's not that hard to get a hold of. That's what makes it really scary. What do you think?
Well, yeah, I mean, like what you're talking about, it's, if I was a script kiddie and I just wanted to cause a little bit of mayhem, it's so easy now to like go to a dark web market or forum, for a small, tiny fraction of a Bitcoin, you can buy remote access Trojans.
Right.
And you can buy like exploit kits, and you can buy phishing kits, like kits to make phishing websites and stuff like that.
Right.
And 20 years ago, 30 years ago, someone would have to have the technological know-how to do that kind of stuff from scratch.
Correct.
But now someone who is not a competent computer programmer can just go and buy malware, and it's really easy. I mean, you can buy ransomware. Some of the best ransomware out there you can buy for the equivalent of a few $100s.
Right.
And when you think of how many hundreds of thousands or millions of dollars you can make from that.
Right. It's all profit.
Yeah. Same with like crypto mining malware.
Right.
Right.
Yeah.
Like I get people asking me all the time, how do I get rich in cryptocurrency? And this is like right up your alley, right? And I tell people, don't believe any get rich quick schemes, because
right.
capitalism isn't designed in such a way that anyone can make themselves rich if they wanted to.
Right. Yeah.
And secondly, these days, like you probably know better than I do, if you wanted to do any sort of effective crypto mining, if you wanted to do it legally, you would have to have access to basically the computer processing power of a data center.
Right. You need a specialized rig or a server farm, something like that.
And that's like possibly hundreds of thousands or maybe even millions of dollars worth of equipment and electricity bills. You can't just start it up as a mom and pop operation.
Right. Yeah. Well, the days of using your own computer to do it are long over,
But it is pretty easy to buy crypto mining malware, and maybe like acquire a botnet, which you can do by transmitting bot malware. And so you have your own like kind of command and control interface. I've seen IRC command and control interfaces for botnets.
Right. Wow.
And then you can use that to distribute your crypto mining malware. And before you know it, there's possibly 1 million smartphones, tablets, PCs that a teeny tiny bit of their processing power is being used in concert to mine Bitcoin for you, or Monero, or whichever cryptocurrency. Probably more likely to be Monero, actually.
Right.
Do open source intelligence by going to dark web markets like Dream Market, Empire Market, Nightmare Market. I find more than 50% of crypto mining malware is for Monero.
Yeah. Yeah. Wow.
I think there's a technological reason for it. I think
I
it's
think
something
it's
to do with
harder. I think because Monero's more of a privacy coin, so the ability to trace it is harder. Yeah.
So there again, you don't need any computer programming know-how. Going on the dark web is a lot easier than lay people think it is.
Right.
And you just buy malware, and then you know, if you don't know what to do with the malware, they'll even have like written instruction for you about how to use it.
Well, that's helpful of them.
So it's like I have a wardrobe full of like beautiful clothes, but I have no say. I cannot sew a button on anything.
Right.
And so it's the same thing with malware now.
Right. You don't.
The skill comes for when you're developing specialized malware for like advanced persistent threats, like coming from cyber warfare units and stuff like that. That is skill.
Right. Right. Wow. Yeah. Wow. You give me a lot to think about, and I'm sure that the people who are going to be watching this have a lot to think about too. Well, Kim, thank you so much for joining me. I really appreciate you taking the time.
Thank you so much, Jason. You have a great channel, and I'm looking forward to watching it grow.
Thank you. Thank you. If anyone wanted to reach out to you on social media, how would they do that?
Easiest way by far, Twitter. So my username on Twitter is KIM, so Kim_Crawley, CRAWLEY. And if anyone wants to reach me, I'll probably respond within 3 hours or less.
Perfect.
Yeah. Other social media, good luck getting a hold of me. I'm a writer. Writers like Twitter.
Right. And I'm going to list the in the description where people can find your material. So I'll put it in the description to some of your content. That way people can have a look at your work.
Excellent. Well, thank you very much, Jason.
All right. Thank you, Kim. I appreciate it.
Thank you.